This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of Masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 580, entitled How Masculist Middle Schoolers Can Pressure Female Middle Schoolers. Description. This flyer explains why Masculists aim to educate middle school males to become Masculists, who then put powerful moral pressure on female middle schoolers to choose to study career-competent majors and not become fluffy crappers, so that they can become FIPs, financially independent persons, as adults, and not manslave and divorce rape a man. Masculists aim for the creation of a FIP Society, in which both sexes are socialized and educated to FIP up, so that men can be freed from man's slavery and divorce rape, thus liberating men from being victims of massive gender crimes that women today commit against men, at the rate of one married father in 4, that is, millions of men every year. Flyer itself. How Masculist Middle Schoolers Can Pressure Female Middle Schoolers, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Before I launch into this flyer, a word about the title. You may be thinking, why middle schoolers and not high schoolers? This is because at the critical age of 16, it's estimated by the Manosphere that about 80% of young women today choose to study what the Masculists label fluffy crap. That is, majors that will make these young women as adults economically useless, career incompetent, so that they then expect to live off the money and labour of a man, the type of woman whom Masculists label with contempt and hatred fluffies, based on the word fluff, that is, with connotations of being light, not serious, not adults, not responsible, not career competent, not FIP, financially independent person. Why do Masculists have such a hatred of fluffies and aim to wipe them out? Because Masculists see them as manslavers, as divorce rapists, who commit massive gender crimes against men, so should be and are hated by Masculists, who are now active in wiping out such women, forcing them to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, spat at and poor, dying a slow, miserable death. Why do Masculists see such women, these fluffies, as manslavers? A century or more ago, there was a real necessity behind the traditional role of the man to be the sole breadwinner of the family, the nuclear family. The Industrial Revolution led to the development of the nuclear family due to the need for families to be mobile, since factories and businesses routinely went bankrupt, so families needed to be mobile to move to the location of future employment. It was simply not practical to move a whole 3-generational extended family, so the family type that was practical to move consisted of the barest reproductive minimum of mum, dad and the kids, that is, the nuclear family. In those days there was no contraception, so women kept getting pregnant and often had a dozen kids. My own mother came from a family with a dozen kids. Taking care of a dozen kids was obviously a full-time job, especially in an era with no household electrical gadgets such as washing machines, vacuum cleaners, electric kettles, stoves, etc. So the nuclear family, with its many kids, forced a division of tasks between the sexes. The mother stayed at home, looking after the kids, a full-time job, and the father worked outside the home to earn the money to keep the whole family financially afloat. If he failed in his job, the family starved and often drove widowed women into prostitution just to earn enough to stay alive. Then in the 1960s came the pill and widespread household gadgets that revolutionized women's lives. With reliable contraception, women chose to have 0, 1 or 2 kids in most cases. So with their household gadgets and their 2 kids off to school, housewives found themselves with time on their hands, who became bored and envied their husbands, who often had rewarding careers that challenged and satisfied them. So by the end of the 1960s, there was a feminist movement that pushed for female careerism and against conservative males who could not adapt to women's changed self-image of living the same career role as men. Decades later came the Masculist movement, which argued that thanks to men, women now have a life expectancy of 85 years and a career window of half a century. So now women can work, so must work, say the Masculists, to free men from man's slavery, that is, working for free for a woman for decades of his life. The Masculists pushed heavily the concept of the FIP, that is, a financially independent person who does not live off the labour and money of another person. Masculists are hateful of man's slavery and expect women to be FIPs or be severely punished by not getting a man, especially when nearly all men have been masculisted. Masculists teach men, initially men, then women and society, that women have a powerful moral duty to FIP up. Otherwise, they are seen as manslavers and divorce rapists. In the current historical era, we live in a divorce court system that is controlled by the feminists who took it over in the 70s, bringing with them their traditional expectations of men as cash machines who live on this earth to pay for women to have babies. That is, the traditional breadwinner role of the male. Masculists are out to liberate men from this man's slavery role by forcing women to FIP up or to not get a man. Typically, in today's world, if a man marries a fluffie and becomes a father, he faces a 1 in 4 chance of being butchered by the fluffy feminist-controlled divorce court system. Half of marriages fail, and 70% of those divorces are initiated by women. If the woman has a university degree, she will initiate the divorce with a 90% probability. When a divorce occurs and there are children involved, the divorcing husband gets butchered in the so-called family courts. He will lose custody of his kids with a 90% probability, causing 2/3 of young men in many countries to wipe their hands of marriage and paternity, since they argue that a 1 chance in 4 of losing his kids is way too unacceptable. He will lose his house to his ex-wife so she can raise her kids in it. He will lose half his wealth and stuff to her, be forced to make child payments to his kids, whom he is barely allowed to see. And if his ex-wife is a real fluffy, he may be forced to pay her alimony for the rest of his life, with no legal nor moral obligation on her to get off her fat parasitic ass and FIP up. Thus she continues to manslave him after the divorce as before the divorce. Since this happens at a rate of about 1 chance in 4 for married fathers, that translates into millions of cases each year where divorcing fathers are butchered routinely, callously, criminally, until it is stopped by the Masculists. So, how do the Masculists stop this mass divorce butchery? By changing society, by changing women, by changing young women, by changing the laws, But before the laws can be changed, societal attitudes need to be changed, since the law reflects the attitudes of the people to whom the law applies. Masculist theorists are very conscious that their main political goal of creating a FIP society will go a long way to solving most of the gender problems that men face. For example, man's slavery, divorce, rape, forced fathering, etc. In a FIP society, both sexes are socialized and educated to be FIPs, so that women do not, fluffy style, expect to be able to live off the money and labour of a man, thus man-slaving him, and making her a gender criminal, hated by the Masculists, and be severely punished by the Masculists. Now to get to the topic of the title of this flyer. Masculists aim to strongly influence young women in middle school to study career competent majors, not fluffy crap majors that will make them fluffy crappers and hence fluffies as adults, who then expect to manslave and divorce rape a man, thus making her hated by the Masculists, who aim to wipe out such women. At the age of 16, millions of young women make a choice as to their majors in high school. So if Masculists, young middle school male Masculists, hope to influence their female classmates, then these young men need to act on these young women before the age of 16, putting powerful moral pressure on them to choose to study career competent majors. Otherwise they will be seen by their male classmates as future fluffies, and hence as manslavers and divorce rapists, and hence hated, who should be punished, and hence will be given the kiss of death in terms of getting a man when the time comes, when nearly all men have been masculisted, who are very conscious of the gender crimes of a fluffy, and hence choose to have nothing to do with them. So, as Masculist ideas spread from the universities to the high schools to the middle schools, then very young men, aged 14 and 15, can preach to their female classmates that they have to FIP up or rot on the shelf, utterly rejected by men, both socially and sexually, spat at for being a future fluffy, a manslaving, divorce-raping parasite, hated and utterly rejected. This is the message that the Masculists are teaching young middle school males, telling them that they should not be man-slaves as adults, and that it is very much in their self-interest to put powerful moral pressure on young women to FIP up, or to pay a very heavy price of being labelled a fluffy, which in time will drive many such young women to suicide, as they are rejected and spat at by nearly all the young men around them. Probably a decade from now, the moral pressure on young women to FIP up, to become female Masculists, and to stop being monoconscious feminazi bitchy, and hence ignored by men, will be overwhelming. When nearly every young man that a young woman comes across has been masculisted, who applies powerful moral pressure on women to FIP up, to be bi-conscious, not to be a monoconscious, misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi cunt, then if she has not transformed herself appropriately, then her life will be made utterly miserable by young men who will spit in her face, utterly rejecting her. Such will be the pressure that young masculisted men will exert on young women, thus fundamentally changing society and liberating men from manslavery and divorce rape and other major gender crimes against men. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 580 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.